going to talk for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes about how to support your kid when your kid's upset, some ideas and suggestions, and then I'll stop talking and then we will all talk about really whatever you want. You can ask questions about this or you can ask questions about anything else and we can think about it together. I can share my thoughts, whatever would be helpful. So here we go. First off, I just want to say good for you for coming. It's not obvious that you would have time, that you would make time, that you would choose to spend your time this way. Obviously, you're a good parent. Obviously, you're doing a good job. Obviously, you're trying to do an even better job, and your kid is lucky to have you, right? Perfect is not a great yardstick for sustainable self-esteem. So good job, really. I mean, you're doing great, and hopefully, you're going to do a little bit better very soon. So just to give us some coordinates in the emotional space, I think about interactions as varying along the dimension of emotional intensity that's in the interaction. So if the charge is pretty low, there's not big emotions, that's a good time to just be doing everyday kind of relationship building and deepening the well of goodwill between people. And then if emotions are higher and people are either upset or afraid or jealous or scared, whatever it is, or even strong positive emotions, that's a good time to be supporting people with their emotions and helping them process whatever's happening. It's also a little bit of a more explosive zone. And so this is a time to tread more carefully and be more intentional about the interactions. And then there's really the red, when people are upset, very upset, to the point of not being safe or making very, very bad decisions. And then the rules completely change. Then we prioritize safety over the relationship. But when we're not in the red, the priority is the relationship almost always, as far as I'm concerned, right? Because I want my kid connected to me over time and coming to me when there's a problem later on. And so I always prioritize the relationship. And so today we're here. Today the kid is upset. Something is happening. Your kid came back from school or got into your car when you picked him up or her up or whatever, and your kid sort of looks like this, and you're like, what do I do now? I should add, as an important disclaimer for the dog lovers in the audience, Earl is actually fine. That's just his face, apparently. He's super cute. He's kind of an internet phenomenon, but that's just his, his resting dog face. He's fine. He's not upset. But our kids are upset sometimes. And so what do? The clock sort of starts ticking once we realize that they're upset about something. I'm going to start with the very bottom line for those of you that only have like 30 seconds of concentration in them because life. So just for 30 seconds, focus, and then do what you need to do. When somebody's really upset, when their emotional charge is very high, they cannot take in anything new. They have too much going on inside, right? And if we try to start giving them ideas and suggestions and change how they think about things and be clever with them, it spills out. Nothing comes in. And often this leads to conflict between us and our kid when we try to pour wisdom into them a little too soon. And so when we see our kid being upset, what we want to do is help the kid become less upset, not solve the problem. First of all, deal with the charge. It's such a critical step. So we deal with the charge, and I mean, the whole rest of the whatever 15 minutes I'm talking is going to be about how to deal with the charge. But first of all, deal with the charge. And then once your kid is no longer so upset, below this arbitrary blue line, whatever that line is, then we can start giving wisdom and sharing ideas and developing plans and all the stuff that we think is actually useful. But really, the first step is not only critical, because the second step is meaningless without the first step, it washes away. Also, the first step is where most of the benefit happens. Because when we're very upset, we're often feeling alone, misunderstood, somebody doesn't get us, nobody gets us. It kind of piles up pretty quickly, especially in younger brains, but also, in our grown-up brains. And the thing that we're really seeking is somebody to just stay connected with us and be connected with us and to feel like we're not alone in this upset. And this all happens during that first phase of charge reduction. Okay, tiny bit more philosophy. When our kid's upset, usually it's because something, unpleasant happened or unwelcome happened. They could be like stubbing our foot, or it can be somebody that we like that didn't want to play with us, or it can be, not getting the grade we wanted or not getting into the team we wanted. All these things are unhappy making, legitimate. The thing that makes it much worse, I would call all of these things pain, kind of primary pain. A bad thing happened, it doesn't feel good. The thing that makes pain suffering in my book is when we resist reality really hard, when we say that shouldn't have happened or it should have happened differently, right? He should have invited me to the party. I should have gotten into the team. I should have studied harder and worked harder, and I'm bad for not doing it, and so on. Like, they're bad, I'm bad, we're bad, the tree is bad, the world is bad, something is bad, something should be different. It's that resistance against the pain that makes it hard. It's kind of like, when you're walking outside and it gets cold, and when you're resisting the cold, it's very cold and unpleasant. And if you kind of relax into it a little bit, it's just cold, right? It's not as bad when you let it be just cold. And that's the distinguishing feature here. And as we interact with our kids when they're upset, a lot of what we can do for them is help them accept the bad thing that has happened and not push so hard against it. Work so that it doesn't happen again, maybe. Figure out ways to feel better, maybe. But let go of that incredible resistance to this bad thing that happened and accept the fact that it happened, and now what? And so I'm going to show you some pretty tactical things, but for those of you that like to think more strategically or spiritually about this, what we're doing as we're applying these tactics or these techniques is modeling acceptance to our child and helping our child accept more of what happened, and through that reduce the amount of suffering that happens, so that we're left just with the pain, and not with the pain and on top of it all the suffering that we bring on board by saying they should have done something differently, I should have done something differently, the tree should have been planted elsewhere, and so on. But if acceptance makes life easier, why aren't we just accepting everything left and right? Why aren't we just walking around being okay? And by acceptance, I don't mean like totally passive. I don't mean, oh, this person is throwing mud at me, it's okay, I just accept it. I mean, by accept, I mean accept current reality and then work to change it if necessary, but not say, oh, this person could not possibly be throwing mud at me. How could this be happening? I just stand there kind of fuming at the world while getting covered in mud, right? So it's the fuming part we're trying to eliminate, move toward action, or move toward non-action and acceptance. What's hard so much about acceptance as a parent, watching your kid being upset, is that we love our kids and we don't want them to be upset. And so often we feel this empathetic pain when they're upset, and we want them to be less upset quickly. And it's a very common conception that we can make people less upset either by telling them to be less upset or by solving their problem. And those two things very rarely work. They sometimes work. If your kid is, 2 and can't reach something and is really upset, and you go like this, they'll get less upset. But when something bigger than that is going on, right? When they weren't invited to a party, you can't just get them invited and to tell them, well, were you nice to that kid in the previous year? And trying to troubleshoot it, I mean, you're going to get now in the line of fire. And so when they're hurting, we're hurting, we want to solve the upset really fast because it hurts us to see it. Also, we know the solution. Like, it's very obvious to us, right? We are decades wiser than them. And it's just very clear to us what needs to be done. So we can just solve it. Like, let's just be done with it. And that's a trap too, right? Because they can't hear it when they're still busy with the upset. The last thing is more pragmatic maybe, but oftentimes when our kids make mistakes, we're the ones paying the price, right? We have to stop what we're doing and like bandage them physically or emotionally. We have to go, unwrinkle things with parents of friends or what have you. We need to deal with, I don't know, get a tutor, whatever the implications are. And so their mistakes impact us negatively, practically, emotionally. It's hard. And so instead of spending time soaking in this bad thing that is happening and allowing it to be happening, we're moving really fast to fix it, and often too fast. We're pouring into that full glass. So this is all by way of setup, and Sorry, I don't like talking for so much actually, but this is kind of the setup of the meeting, but hopefully this gives you a sense of where I'm coming from. So as we're having this interaction with our kid who looks like Earl the dog, who's unhappy, the conversation has these three conceptual pieces: setup, following, and leading. And setup is really just us making sure that we are present and making it clear to our kid that we are present. We put away stuff, right? We put away the phone, we turn toward our kid, all the basic stuff. You know how to do the things, but sometimes it requires remembering that, like, this is not a conversation to have while doing other things, right? You wanna single task it. As soon as you realize your kid's upset, shut down the stuff, move it aside, turn to your kid, like add some drama. Like already you're like, okay, tell me, right? So your kid knows that this is about your kid. And that's the main goal of this kind of phase, the setup. Following is when we are listening to our kid. We might be prompting our kid a little bit. I'll talk about this in a couple of minutes, but the main goal is to let your kid lead the conversation, talk about whatever's upsetting for your kid. And through this talking, your kid loses charge and eventually gets to this calmer point. This is by far and away the most important part of the conversation in terms of trust building, in terms of relationship building between us and our kids, and in terms of helping them feel better. By far and away, this is for them. The leading part is for us. We feel good when we give advice and whatnot. I would suggest that the main goal when we're leading is to work on the power dynamic and work to equate the power between us, because a huge power differential already exists between kids and parents, obviously. And if we're upset in front of someone, and especially if we're sharing details that are even more vulnerable or embarrassing, or they just see us super upset, or the power differential just becomes more and more extreme. And so working to balance it out allows us to then problem solve as a team. We'll talk about this at the end, but this is the goal that I would suggest for the leading phase. And then within each of them, there's a few kind of sub skills. The setup stuff I'm not going to talk about anymore. I think you all know what I'm talking about. I'll focus on the following, not surprisingly. And in the following, in particular, I'm going to focus on the queen of following skills, which is the WIG. I call it a WIG because it's nice and short. It's a paraphrase, right? You're saying back what I got. A WIG is an acronym for what I got. Oldest trick in therapy book, and it survived because it works and it helps. And it's not a trick. The whole point there is, as your kid talks, you say back what you understood your kid to be saying. It's the simplest thing in the world. It's very hard to do because we want to do all this other stuff that we think will help, but won't, because they're upset and they don't want to hear it. Right? And so your kid talks and you say back what you understood your kid to say, and it's like magic. First of all, because your kid will keep talking, because charge wants to express itself. When we're upset, we want somebody to hear us. We want somebody to understand us and to get us. And charge will express itself. You just need to give it room. And when you're wigging, when your kid says, it comes back and you're like, how was school? And your kid's like, sucked. You're like, what's going on? And your kid says, the teachers are dumb. What do? Right? Your kid's upset. And so you say, dumb? And your kid goes, yeah. So that was like a micro wig. It was like, yeah, my math teacher just keeps dinging me on stupid stuff. That's not really a problem. Because your kid wants to talk about this. And you just need to give your kid space. So how do you paraphrase in a way that gets them to keep going without asking questions, without analyzing or making suggestions or anything like that? And the idea is that you say to them what you understood them to say. You say it recruiting as much warmth and caring as you can. And you keep the topic exactly where they left it, the spotlight. So I have these two conceptual tools that I think of. One is the spotlight, which is what we're talking about. So right now your kid is talking about the math teacher. That's the topic. Now you might know that you might suspect your kid is actually upset because of, having to, I don't know, what, a trip got canceled that your kid was really looking forward to, right? But you don't say, are you really upset because of that trip? Because now you're fighting the charge. Instead, you keep the spotlight where it is, and your kid will move the spotlight as close as your kid is comfortable to the thing that's actually upsetting for your kid as the conversation progresses. And so a good wig keeps the spotlight exactly where where your kid left it. The other way to think about it is like it's a wheel of a car. And when you're entering this kind of following mindset in the conversation, the following stage, your kid is driving, which is, I understand, a terrifying analogy, and I apologize, but your kid is driving, not you. You're in the passenger seat, and you don't reach over and grab the wheel and kind of decide where to go and what to look at, right? That would be super dangerous. And so your kid is driving, you're commenting on what you're seeing as you're passing through. And you're just saying it back. That's all you're doing. You're not asking questions. You're not making, assumptions or sharing theories or taking on their emotions and amplifying it or suggesting none of that. You're just listening. And as you do it, their charge goes down. So they say, "What's up? School teachers are dumb." And you're like, "Teachers are annoying you?" "Yeah, the kids are annoying me. The math teacher is dinging me on irrelevant stuff." And you say, "So you feel like even though you're doing it right, she's dinging you?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's what's happening. And, every time this happens in quizzes, then I have to stay and do it again. And then I'm late for break and I can't meet with my friends." You say, "Oh, so you're missing out on friends time too because of this?" "Yeah, yeah." And charge is over. This was kind of an accelerated version. Usually it takes more than a minute, but sometimes it can take a minute, but usually it'll be a few minutes. But as they talk, their charge goes down. Every time they give you a "yeah, exactly," that's like you win a point, right? Imagine a ding. They'll say, "Yeah, yeah, exactly." And then they'll keep talking and their charge just went down by a point. Great. And they'll keep going down. And eventually they'll say, "Yeah," and they'll just kind of look at you. They're done. At which point you check if they're really done. I'll get to that in a second. So like a couple of examples. I don't think my guess is all of you understand what I'm saying. So we're not going to do this like in quiz form, but you're talking with your kid. Oh, this lines up with the math example that I made up just now. So, your kid's saying, "I have no idea what's going on with math. I was kind of getting it. And now it's like integrals and I have no idea. Math is stupid anyway." Right? What do you do if your kid's upset? So would you say, "I don't blame you. I hate math too"? It's sort of empathize-y, but you're kind of moving the spotlight to you now. And if your kid's upset about this, there's a reason. It's not about, they're not upset about hating math. They're upset about some. So this is sort of hitting the mark, right? Have you talked about it with the teacher? Great advice. Very poor timing. If your kid is actually upset. If your kid's not upset, that's fair game, right? But if they're upset, now you're moving to solutions. All you'll get is resistance, right? Your kid says, "I hate math, integrals. Who even needs that? I'm not going to use that in the grocery store. There's ChatGPT now." And you're like, "Oh, did you talk about it with the teacher?" The kid's like, "What? Have you been listening to what I'm saying?" Like, you're just going to get in the line of fire, right? Good idea. Save it. Save it until your kid's not upset. So math was making sense to you until you got into expanded integrals or whatever you're doing now. Good wig, I would say, on the face of it. There are multiple wigs that could be happening here, right? But I like this one. Definitely compared to the others, because you're just kind of saying back, but it's conversational. Your kid could say, I don't know if I was getting it. I mean, it's been hard, but it's dumb. Like, I don't care about it anyway. Conversation is progressing. I'll just move on because, again, I think you're getting this and I don't want to waste your time. I think that's a criminal thing to do to people. So you got to this point, your kid is expressing charge, you're wigging, expressing more, wigging, expressing wigs, and it goes on for like a few minutes. And eventually your kid says, "Yeah, that's right." And you kind of count to 5 and they're still saying nothing. Charge potentially done. So you check if the charge is actually done by doing a little summary. So a summary is when you say the whole story, start to finish, probably in 2 to 3 sentences. It's like a big wig. So you say, "Oh, so what's the example?" So we'll use the math example again. So, math was going okay for the first couple of months, but then it stopped feeling good. Like you started feeling like you're more behind and it was actually taking you away from spending time with your friends because you had to spend extra time on it. and your friends were actually making fun of you for spending more time on math. That's like a dorky thing in your group. And now you feel like you've kind of lost the friendships with them. Is that right? That's a summary, right? Of like maybe a 5 or 10 minute conversation. Then after a summary, basically one of two things will happen. Either your kid will say, yeah, yeah. And you know what? That's bad because now I can't make it. And they're back kind of in charge mode. And that's okay because you can wig and eventually the charge will run out. Usually when they go up like this, you've kind of hit level 2. Like, congratulations, this is a good thing because now they'll talk about something probably a little deeper, right? Another layer peels. So they may be like, yeah, and I really don't think I can make new friends. I'm feeling totally alone at the school right now. This is a very important conversation to have, right? So if after a summary, you get this inflection and charge comes back, great. You're continuing to connect. You're talking about important things. You know what to do there. Or they'll say something like, yeah, that's basically it. Charge is essentially done. Congratulations. Can move on to everybody's favorite phase. So I didn't talk about questions here, but basically some WIGs can be phrased as questions, but the goal is to not collect any information unless your kid is offering it, unless you're actually confused, right? If you can't follow, like a legitimate clarification question is, wait, do you mean Jill from your class or Jill, your friend's sister? That's a clarifying question. Fair enough, right? Basically anything else, no. And it's unlikely that you'll need questions. When your kid's upset, they're gonna share a bunch. Be very careful about taking over the conversation through questions. It's a big temptation and it's a big loophole, because sometimes when your kid's upset, there's something they want to talk about or something that they're upset about that they're not comfortable bringing up to you. And they will take any exit you give them to not talk about it. So if they want to talk about feeling lonely at school and totally unpopular, but they're embarrassed to talk about it with you for whatever reason, and they start talking about the math teacher, and then you start talking with them about math, and if they try different strategies, you're never going to hear about this thing that's actually on their minds, right? We just don't know what they're thinking and what they're feeling unless they tell us. So we need to give them a lot of room to tell us, unless you're amazing at reading their mind and asking the right question, which I'm not, right? So I just need to give them room to talk and make it clear that anything he says is okay, which is a big function of the WIG too, right? Because as you're saying it back, you're saying, I'm following, I'm trying to follow, I care about your experience, I respect your experience, it's real and legitimate, I'm not judging, I'm just taking it in. I want to know what it's like to be you, I care about you, right? All these messages are coming in through this very, very simple act. And it frees up your brain too. You don't need to be analyzing during this time. You just kind of listen and say back. But we were here where the summary concluded with your kid saying, yeah, that's basically right. And then your kid is silent. So the charge is done, because if they had more charge, they'd be talking. So at this point, we switch over to everybody's favorite part. And we do get to give advice here if they give us permission. I strongly recommend asking for permission. And this can be very colloquial and very quick, right? It could be, oh, well, you want to hear what I think? And if your kid says no, then don't. But 98% of the time, they'll say, sure, yeah, because you just spent a bunch of time listening to them. They kind of owe you. And at this point, they probably feel like you understand. You actually understand what they're going through because you gave this good summary and they said, yeah. Right? So you're now in the know. And so you can say, do you want to hear what I think? Or you can say, I have some ideas you want to hear. Or you might say, oh, this reminds me of this other thing that happened to you a couple of years ago. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or you might say, can I ask some questions? Right? Which is also part of leading, right? This is now you taking the wheel and saying, can we also think about this other thing and how it connects to this? This is where you get to do all this stuff. So ask for permission, claim your ignorance. That's a big one, to say, look, I realize there's a lot of stuff going on at school and I don't know a fraction of what's going on there for you, right? I care about all of it, but obviously I can't know all of it. And we've been talking about it for 10 minutes, right? So I may be missing some important details here. So tell me if this is sounding way off track, okay? So like really like ask them to disagree with you. And this creates such a nice power balance, Because now you're inviting them to disagree. It's okay. You're saying, I don't know everything. Teach me about you. They don't have to fight your advice. You're on the same team now, right? So you ask for permission, you claim your ignorance. And so, I don't know everything. Tell me if this is on the right track. But from what you said, it sounds to me like it might be helpful to blah, 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 blah. And what's the worst that's going to happen now, right? They're not going to say, oh, you don't get it. You're just, because you do get it, right? And you have even invited them to tell you that you don't, in case you don't. So worst case scenario, they'll say, no, I don't think that's going to work because blah, 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 blah. Great. More information. You can think together about it. If they get hyped up, roll back the following, help them release the charge, wig a couple times until they get calmer, and then talk again about your ideas. It's great. It totally changes the dynamic of like trying to solve their problem all the time. I once had a 15-minute conversation in the car with my then, I think 3 or 4-year-old son, who was very upset that another child opened the door out of preschool because he wanted to open the door to preschool. And he just kept talking about it, and I just kept wigging. It's like, I wanted to open it. I said, oh, you really wanted to be the one to do it? He was like, yeah, and he wasn't listening to my words. I told him I want to open it. And I said, oh, he just went there even though he didn't want him, even though he told him? He's like, yeah. We had this conversation for 15 minutes. And then, and I kid you not, this is my favorite part of the story, he paused and he said, why do I feel better? This was amazing. This was like exactly what I wanted. Maybe he was, telepathizing what I wanted him to say. I don't know, but it was incredible. So even very little kids, by all means. All right. I think that's everything. It is everything. Now a word from our sponsor, me. More stuff on parentingforhumans.com. If you're interested, some recorded workshops like this, some blog posts and so on. If you want to join the mailing list, you're welcome to get blog posts, to hear about future workshops. We have a group that's going on for parents that want to just think about parenting, an hour every couple of weeks. Just talk to other parents and like think what's going well, what's not, what do I do? It's kind of action oriented. The other thing I wanted to introduce is this other project I've started working on in the past year or so for divorcing dads, in case any of you are or know of any. And the goal of this work is to support fathers who are divorcing to staying in touch with their kids, staying strongly connected to their kids, right? Just giving them kind of the tools and making sure that they're staying healthy and ideally sane during the process. Divorcing dads, you may know, is just a huge risk factor for suicide for men. Divorcing men are the highest of all relationship categories in suicide. It's a big problem. And so this project aims to both help the dads and to help them stay connected with the kids. I have absolutely nothing against divorcing moms. The reason I am doing divorcing dads is because I think, one, moms have a good deal of resources around divorce. Men have almost nothing out there. It's kind of amazing. And secondly, I'm imagining that I would connect better with divorcing dads, and I don't know that divorcing moms need me to be mansplaining divorce to them. And so I'm sticking to men. But if you or someone you know might benefit from this, just send them over to divorcingdads.org.